Welcome to the Pro-2-Pro podcast, where we explore the stories and strategies of successful entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Keith Hanenian, and in each episode, I'll be sitting down with a different guest to learn about their journey, their challenges, and their insights into building a successful business. As a lawyer who works with industry leaders, I've seen firsthand the passion and drive that it takes to turn an idea into a thriving enterprise. And in this podcast, I want to share those stories with you, our viewers and listeners. Whether you're an inspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or just someone who loves a good success story, you'll find something to inspire and inform you in each episode. So sit back, relax, and join us as we dive into the world of entrepreneurship and discover the insights that can help you succeed in your own business. Welcome to another episode of Pro-2-Pro. I'm here with my friend, David, and David is the owner of Bespoke Co, a custom suit and stylist. Welcome to our program,
Thank
David.
you. Thanks for having me.
As we can tell that you're dressed for success. You've got me dressed as well,
Right,
which is great.
right.
So I wanted to touch base with you, obviously, and share with our guests a little bit about your background and some of the things that you've done to get you to where you are now. I mean,
Sure.
Obviously, we met through, I believe it was a good friend of mine, Jack Gordon,
Yep.
a local
Right.
attorney, had introduced you and I together. And I don't know how many years ago that's been, but you're essentially my go-to person for all my suits. And what I find amazing about you is the fact that you have a unique skill set of pairing clothes with people and making them feel comfortable. But I never really got to know what drove you to get to the point where you're at now in this successful business. So can you give us a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. So I grew up in southern New Jersey, suburb outside of Philadelphia. It's, kind of a not rural area. It was old farmland, and it was a great place to grow up, involved in sports, and I went to public. Actually, I started early on at Quaker school. So from 2nd through 4th grade, I went to Quaker school because it was the best of the school systems in our area. And then from there, I went to public school, but had just a great background in art and music, and I loved the arts. And so I was always driven in that direction. So when I was in high school, I worked it was a mall store that's no longer in business. It was called the Lodge at Harvard Square, similar to the Gap, like that kind of a thing. And they had these chalkboard drawings outside, kind of like a billboard drawing of, the specials that they had going on or featured products and things. And I started drawing these boards of theirs. So I got into some of the graphics as well as selling the clothing. And that's kind of where it started. That was back in high school in 1979.
So you're about my age then. So you were playing sports, but you still had this other interest. How did that interplay, or did it? Because when I think about it back in the day, so you had your jocks, you had your sports people, you had your nerds. We had all these different concepts of who people were.
I think I was a hybrid of all of those.
Yeah,
things.
it sounds like it. Yeah, it sounds like it.
My high school tennis team was number 1 in New Jersey the year that I graduated, and I was manager of the team. So I was in charge of putting together photos and the yearbook and calling in scores to the newspaper. So I was always involved in more than just playing the sport. I love kind of an entrepreneurial approach then. I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah.
But managing and building a business within, the activities that I took part in. And that was pretty cool. And when I graduated high school and went to college, I went to Keene State College, which is in southern New Hampshire. Typical New England town with a main street and a church at the head of the square. And there was this store on that square, and it sold men's and women's cashmere jackets and beautiful sweaters and clothing. And it was just an easy segue from what I was doing into something that I thought was really important for me. And putting things together and making things right for each individual customer at the time was was a blast. I
So
really
you,
enjoyed it.
So you started working in a garment type store in college?
Yeah. So sorry, Dad, I would cut class sometimes and just to work because I knew it was important for me to work and I wanted to work into a management program. And so I knew that I had to take certain steps in order to do that. So I loved that. I got into buying and we would go to Boston and to New York. I worked with the manager and the buyer, and just to get a good education as to what the industry was all about.
Let me back you up for our
sure.
listeners and our viewers. When you say buying, what do you mean? What does that mean?
So there's different levels within a retail company. Most customers just see the product on a floor. Well, the product has to get there some way. So you have salespeople that are managed by store managers or department managers, and then beyond that are buyers and merchandisers. So it's someone that takes a broad perspective as to what's hot, what's trendy, what is really big in the public's eye, and we create a whole department filled with merchandise to reflect that, to reflect the trends and what's hot and happening, kind of. So there are behind the scenes people that put all that together. So I wanted to grow in my career and I aspired to grow within those behind the scenes, but I always loved the thrill of the sale. I say that I'm salesy, but I love that. I love the entertainment part of working with clients. And I think that's really important because it's a whole lifestyle thing. It's learning what the clients are, just like you and I, understand what we do. I had to get a delve into your profession a little bit to see what your needs are, what makes sense for you. And that's what made me successful in stocking stores. When I was at Nordstrom, I had a $25 million responsibility. Which is,
that's amazing.
Yeah. So when you're responsible for that much, you have to make sure that what you're bringing in is going to sell.
Did you always know that one way or the other you were going to be in the fashion industry, so to speak?
I think so. So my junior year in college, I went to Italy for the summer with my art professor and a group of other students. I was an art history major. And we were, traveling all over Italy. And my art professor said to me, when we return to New Hampshire, you're going to change your major to business, get a business degree, and pursue this love of clothing and art on the business side of it. And that's basically what I did.
Wow. You ended up doing that.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you had the interplay of it
Yeah.
all. And what an experience in Italy. I couldn't even imagine. It took me 50 some odd years to get to Italy. You got there in college.
I was fortunate. I had parents that were fortunate enough to put me through college and to do the things that I want. And my dad was always really supportive of what I did and what I wanted to do with my life.
And that's a good point. So generally speaking, family can have a positive effect. It can have a negative effect on someone growing and making certain decisions. It sounds to me that yours with your family, you had a positive.
Yeah, it was positive. I mean, my parents divorced when I was about 13 or 14. And, that was a traumatic experience. But I think I learned from that too. I learned to grow stronger. They lived just up the street from each other. So, geographically, it didn't change things much. And then in my life, I know a big jump forward, but in my life, I went through a divorce as well. And my dad and I became like best friends.
Well, I know you talk about your dad now still.
Yeah,
very close.
I do. So very close. But it took my divorce really to have a better understanding of what he and my mom went through. And it really helped me to grow as an adult and a person. And again, jumping around a little bit, I ended up remarrying. My wife, Nicole, has 2 girls. My ex and I had 3 children. So between us, we have 5 kids. So, learning what I experienced in my childhood and now as an adult, we try to be as open with our kids. And as I had the experience to go through school and to work through a career, we're trying to do the same thing for them. So
with regard to your career choices early on.
Mm-hmm.
Was your father a sounding board in helping guide you, or were you pretty much on your own?
Yeah, no, he was. I was fortunate that he offered me those opportunities. He was very early on. He worked in retail also. He is now a retired orthodontist. He had a very successful career in orthodontics, which I had an office to walk into if I wanted to. School was not my strong suit academically. And so, getting through a liberal arts program and business program, let alone medical school, that was not my direction. So,
but it sounds like you knew what you wanted.
I did, but it was still, you don't really know. I don't think, maybe some people do. I talk to, I'm fortunate enough, I dress all the local sports teams, and I talk to these young athletes, and a lot of them had no idea. And then some were like, I'm going to be a professional athlete. So it's hard to know, but it's really the practical experience and going through it all and developing through the different jobs that I had that really gave me a better perspective as to what I wanted to do. And in June of 2007, I started Bespoke & Company and haven't looked back. And the last 7 years have been phenomenal. And I never dreamed that it would be what it is. There are days where I want to take my phone and, throw it out the window because I can't have a minute to myself. And I'm not complaining. It's a good problem to have. And I've surrounded myself with some great people. I have a business partner who is business development, and I handle the creative side. So, I've learned how to kind of put something together in a smaller way with all of the large experience that I've had. And
so that takes me to a point I want to get from you. Was there anything that you think in particular that you experienced probably through college leading up to your decision to start Bespoke that was this eye-opening moment for you, or aha moment where you said you wanted to be independent?
Certainly. Yeah, a couple of them. So in my retail career, and as I mentioned, it was really important to sell what we stocked the stores with, but I always had a love of the uniqueness of custom clothing. So Hickey Freeman, which is a clothing brand out of Rochester, New York, used to do trunk shows at Nordstrom, and I became friendly with the CEO.
So tell me what a trunk show is. Tell us what a trunk show is.
So a trunk show, in the old days of a trunk show, a salesman, when he had his leftover samples at the end of a season, would bring the trunk filled with samples and sell the clothing.
That's where it came from.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what it's developed into is the vendor will typically come and show other options that you would not have seen if the buyer didn't order something, and they are able to create it in a more custom fashion for that individual
more
customer.
Unique.
It's more unique. And it broadens the opportunity to buy more stuff. And I always loved that because it added more revenues to my, we were graded on our sales and the history from year after year. So that was just a little fluff on top of it. And then I moved to Tampa with Hugo Boss in 2001. I opened the International Plaza when it was brand new.
Oh, okay.
So
that's what brought you to Tampa.
That's what brought me. Yeah. So I spent most of my career in New York and Manhattan and the Northeast, but that's what moved me to Tampa. And Hugo Boss was somewhat limited and didn't offer the custom. And we had, Tampa, as we see now, has grown tremendously. Mm-hmm. But even 20 some years ago, there were still, 3 major sports teams, and we had professional athletes. There weren't a lot of options for them at the time. And I remember, not to name drop, but Derek Jeter.
Go ahead.
Derek Jeter and a couple of his friends came into Hugo Boss, and I remember, my guys were on commission, and there wasn't a lot that they could buy because of limitations with fit. And so I thought, you know what, I need to find a way to do something in a bigger fashion, to be able to sell more people. And kind of my motto is somewhat, you can't be all things to all people, but I wanted to have something for everybody. And that's basically what caused the start of Bespoke & Company.
So you kind of found a niche, mm-hmm. and based on a need and your frustration within the industry, at least your job, in that you were limited in what you could provide, and you saw that opportunity.
Exactly. And face it, I mean, even, you as an attorney, and you have fellow, you talked about Jack, and he referred you, even within the attorney profession, you all have your own individual look and style, and your target audience obviously may be different from another attorney. So I have to look at each individual and find out really what their needs are. Again, I impress upon that to make sure that somebody is getting a great value for the clothing that I sell to them. So, I have great affordable clothing, and I have high-end luxury clothing. So, the price points are all over the place. But I want to make sure that, when you come to me and spend good money, that it's going to go to good use, whether it's for your profession, whether it's for your social life, casual, it's a lifestyle thing.
So, we talked off camera before we started the podcast, and some of the comments that you made, I want to bring to our audience. You talked a little bit about getting to know your customer to better help them. And in today's society with social media, this idea or concept of branding oneself, and your ability to be able to really help that person in spite of themselves sometimes,
right.
in getting comfortable wearing certain clothing. And from my perspective, obviously as an attorney doing the podcast and all, I've always had a love for clothing anyway. Always, my whole life. And then, obviously being in the fitness and being in fitness and loving fitness, and then my body changes over the years. Can't get clothes that look right off the rack anyway. But for me, the idea of being dressed appropriately and finding the right colors and the right styles gives me such a sense of confidence. And we talk about this on the podcast in general with entrepreneurs and presentation. Right. But behind the scenes is a guy like you in a business that you have, right, that basically sets the tone for that individual. So talk a little bit about that for our listeners. Well, speaking
of tone, and not to throw you under the bus, but recently you came in and your assignment was to find some earth tone clothing. Yes. And what it turned out was that it was supposed to be jewel tones and not earth tones. So that's a big thing. So I know you and your wife had a conversation, and you wanted to kind of find some things, and color is important. It shouldn't be the be all end all. I've had clients that have come to me and said, look, I had my colors done. This is the only thing that I'm allowed to wear. And I'm like, there are guidelines to that. It's not necessarily, firm rules. So I've done this for a decent amount of time. So I've had a good experience and look, I've made my mistakes too. I'm not far from perfect, but it's having a conversation with someone and really getting an understanding of, again, what their needs are, but what their personality is, who their target audience is. When I get up in the morning, I look at my calendar and I look at who I'm going to see that day and what I'm going to be doing that day. And I dress accordingly and appropriately. And sometimes there may be a change, knowing that if I have someone coming in to buy a half a dozen suits, then I want to dress in a suit the way that I want to promote myself and my business. Whereas if it's someone that's coming in that's going to be more casual, then I may do a sport jacket with jeans. We have such a variety of different options. But it's understanding that. And I think that's true for any profession. And I try to get my clients to understand that is, what do? You think hard and kind of dissect what you're doing and making sure, because the majority of my clothing is handmade in Italy. And the owner of the company that produces this has said to me a number of times, he said, I don't have anyone that I've ever worked with that has the same clients over and over, year after year after year. And we call it our friends and family. And it is true, that we see that because there's a level of trust that this brings.
Absolutely.
It's not brain surgery, but it for me it is. It's what I do.
No, it's an art
form, and it's important. And I've just been fortunate. And I'll use an example of something that happened recently. And again, I said I'm not perfect and I make mistakes. I have a good client and a friend, and he had a suit. And things have gotten in modern times very close to the body. Guys are wearing things a lot tighter. And with that, you open up opportunities to have more accidents with clothing. So this guy, he blew out the seat of his pants.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He bent down, and it was just a weird, crazy thing that happened. And he was really upset, and he called me, and we talked on the phone. And I guarantee what I sell. I guarantee fit, and I own my mistakes. And it wasn't my personal mistake.
Sure.
But I'm his guy. So I made it right. Since then, he's come back and spent tens of thousands of dollars with me. I mean, he just really believed in me. I took care of him, and I handled the situation. And I think that's going to be true for anyone, in any profession. Maybe not the medical field. You can't make too many mistakes there. But this is clothing, and the proverbial shit happens. Can I say that?
Yeah, you can say that. Sure.
So it's, it is. I'm human. We're working with materials and threads, but the majority of my experiences have been so overwhelmingly positive that I love what I do. I love going to work every day. There was a time when I worked in retail stores in the mall that I had to work on a Sunday night or whatever, and that wasn't so attractive, but I paid my dues, and now I can kind of call my own shots. Although I do work often on Saturdays and weekends, and I think
we all do, right?
Yeah.
If you're on a business, you have your own business. There's really no time clock in punching out and punching in. You do
there
what
is
you
no
need
time
to do.
clock. Absolutely.
That's the downside. What people will say to running a business, but at the end of the day, it's your business,
right,
and you're going to take care of your baby.
Yeah.
So let me take you back a little bit.
Okay,
you
sure.
spoke a little bit about customer service, and obviously within any industry, customer service, dealing with people, you obviously have a good personality. You've got empathy. You have an understanding, and you're looking for a long-term relationship. Mm-hmm. And that transcends any industry, like you said. But there's a distinction, I believe, that you bring to the table that I think you need to talk a little bit about. I mean, some of your competitors, and I went to, and I'll say it, there was Tom James was a company years ago that I knew of mm-hmm. through a referral when I was a young associate, where they bought me a suit. That was right. one of the perks that I got when I joined this firm in my early 30s. And so some salesperson comes with a little bag, and they come to the office, and it's this idea of customization. Mm-hmm. And peel the onion, I come to learn that that's not really customization, especially in light of what I've experienced with you. And the salespeople, while they may be nice, they're not necessarily, some may be skilled in certain areas, but for the most part, it's nothing to what you bring to the table mm-hmm. in your particular industry and for your business. But talk a little bit about the evolution of you and the distinction in creating bespoke.
Sure. Well, I learned from my competitors' business models, and I know that particular company. I know the other retail stores in the area, and kind of how they approach business. And I mentioned I spent most of my career in New York, and I lived in LA and bigger cities where competition is fierce. So I came to Tampa, where it was a little looser, but it's not anymore. No, it's not anymore. So it's interesting. Actually, my ex-wife, I gave her some trade terms, and she came up with Bespoke & Company. We did a big SEO program early on when we did our website, which I built. That it was a very painstaking process to go through and actually write the whole site. But that name bespoke is a trade term. So it's an English term that means to be spoken for. It relates to luxury custom items like clothing, guns, cars, things like that, oftentimes made in Italy. And so that was a big deal. Well, what's happened now is that term has been used by a lot of other companies. You've got Bespoke Post. There are some other companies that use them. It's become
somewhat ubiquitous at this point.
Yeah. However, because I was so early on, and it's in the name of my business,
it's a lead gen still for you?
We're still, yeah. So in the search engines, I rise to the top.
What a great idea. That's great.
Well, it was an accident, but
hey, sometimes
but
that's
I'll
great.
take it.
They will take it. Yeah.
So, but it's so a lot of my competitors now are using that word bespoke as a tag. Instead of saying custom clothier, they're a bespoke clothier. Oh. And I don't know if that's because of me, but it definitely has raised the level of competition. And we had a thing where it was during COVID, I believe, and there was a company, and we got all of these angry clients that were calling us because we had the name Bespoke. Well, there was another thing on Instagram. They were selling bespoke dog beds.
Oh my gosh.
And so somehow when they Googled, they came up with my name, and we had a handful of people. So I reached out to the company, or I did some research so that I could point these upset people. Last thing I needed was these people going on my social media platforms and blasphemizing me, you know?
It's a DBA. So, is it a DBA at this point? This bespoken company? Because you can't really trademark it, or is it trademarked?
Right. No. It is. Yeah, it is a DBA.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. But it's interesting that the origin of the name has had an impact in different ways, the majority of which have been positive for us. So I kind of forgot your question.
No, it was basically how you were distinct from those other clothing companies in customer service.
So working for Nordstrom, who at the time was the premier customer service company, at the time it was third generation, and I think they've lost a lot of their luster in recent years, which is unfortunate, because I put a lot of my blood, sweat, and tears into that company. But they were, and I remember it was a big deal to serve the client and to not ask questions, but to give them the best experience possible. And I have a ton of different stories that I could share with you at Nordstrom. But I remember one of the things by the time clock in one of the stores, there was an article that was posted next to the time clock, and it was about a bank. And the bank was trying to emulate Nordstrom and hire these people and train them to be nice to the clients. Well, you can't do that. You can't change someone's personality. You have to hire nice people. And I think what Nordstrom did was that they created a culture within their business that had, good people, and it created a good experience. And so that was kind of the way I wanted to model my business, but then even more personal. And so honestly, as I grew the business, the type of people that I targeted were people that were kind of like-minded, or the type of people that I would want to be associated with as friends, or I say friends and family, which is true. A lot of my clients are friends that I've traveled with, or that we have, done more together. I think with, I mentioned I dress all the local sports teams, from the GMs to the coaches to the players and administrators. And something that's important to me is to give back to the community, but to also support my clients. So rather than pay for advertising, which print advertising has just not worked for us, I will support, these athletes' foundations, or, your favorite charity, or whatever it is. And we go to big gala events. This last weekend, I played in a golf tournament. Mike Evans from the Buccaneers had a big golf tournament that we sponsored and supported, and then he had a gala the following night on Saturday night.
It sounds to me like the synergy that you've created within your business model is heavily client centric, mm-hmm. and that creates growth for you within. So your biggest marketing tool, so to speak, is your innate client base that you already have as a captive. Right. And in order to continue and fertilize and grow that client base, you need to take care of that client base. Hence, go to your background from Nordstrom and customer service and all the things that you did mm-hmm. to solidify those relationships.
Right. And even before Nordstrom, I use that as an example because a lot of people understand and know
mm-hmm.
that their concepts.
Yeah, it's totally different working
for small mom and pop businesses and small retail stores, and having it, like family businesses which I've worked for several very successful small family businesses, learning those cultures and seeing how these people come back for everything that they need, because they rely on it and they want to support local and small, which that's been a benefit to me too. But it's it's very true. I mean, it's a culmination of all of those different experiences that I had with these different types of businesses and packaging them all into, my way.
You're bringing up really interesting points for people who be listening or watching us, in that, during my formative years when I was younger, I would go to my dad owned chain dry cleaning stores in Manhattan and in Harlem, and in different locations. He had one on the Upper East Side on 89th and Madison. He had one up in Lenox. And I would see my dad working so hard in the summers when I would go there, and how the customers sometimes would talk to him and it would upset me. My father was always so kind and so nice to everyone. And what I noticed as I would observe is the fact that he was more than a dry cleaner. He was a friend, a confidant. He essentially became like a close friend of a lot of these people who'd be dropping off clothing.
Right.
And my father used to say that customer's always right. You always have to take care of the customer. They can go to anybody they want. Sometimes they just want a vent. You don't know what they went through in a particular day. But so long as you're empathetic towards their needs, you listen to them and you do what's right, they will come back to you. And people that won't come back to you, or they just want to complain, you don't want those people anyway.
Right, exactly.
And they kind of will you'll lose them. They'll filter out. So with you in how you establish this network of people and you giving back to these people, I think that synergy has played a tenfold for you as you've built up this business.
It has. And I didn't know it was happening as it was happening. It was just kind of an instinctive way. And again, all the things that I learned and the nuggets that I took from the different experiences that I had throughout my career gave me this, profile or outline as to how I wanted to run my business. And I'm still so immersed in it that every day is a new experience, and I don't see it that. So we were talking earlier, and I kind of half joked about it, but yesterday, being at the Buccaneers, I was with a couple of people that helped me, and we were looking, we look at these guys like celebrities, like they're larger than life, and they're coming over to me like I'm the celebrity, and I don't view myself that way.
You are for them, though, because they need you.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and it's a real nice compliment and testament to what we've really built. And the business that I do with the sports teams is a fabulous portion of my business, but it's a fairly small percentage. But it adds credibility to what I do, because people do see these, people as outstanding in the community, or when they're out on the field, they're the heroes that young kids grow up with.
General public has just such a this affinity for sports people,
right?
But let's talk a little bit about that, because you get these individuals who they've got God-given talents, and they've also many of them worked really hard to get to where they are. But as far as their style of dressing, as far as their presentation, of course there's a few who may have a love for it and know what to do, but they are immersed in the business world. Let's face it, sports, it is a business. And so they probably come to you in part for guidance and establishment of their particular brand.
Certainly. Right? Well, and a lot of them, whoever their musical idols are, they see how they present themselves on stage, and they also try to emulate that type of a look, and they're kind of searching for that. And I've had a couple of guys that I've worked with from the beginning of their careers, and there's been an evolution with them. But what I try to get them to do, and a lot of them I said I have 5 kids, but I have a lot more than 5 kids, because I feel like these guys I parent them in certain ways. I've taken a few of them to social events and helped them to, groom themselves not just with their clothing, but in how they present themselves to the community and to society. But it's understanding what your brand is and where you come from deep down in your heart and your head, and knowing how you're going to present yourself to your public. You know, when these guys are on the field, of course, they're in a uniform and they have helmets on and you don't see them. So just to step aside for a second, I do an annual charity event. And part of what I do in that event is a fashion show. And I have a lot of my sports personalities that are clients model in this fashion show. And it's a way for people to see these people in another light. But one of the biggest critiques of my show is that I don't announce who these guys are. And people don't know who they are sometimes without their helmets on.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of funny, but they're human beings. I mean, they're people. And yeah, they're a star on the field and oftentimes a star within their community. But I like to respect them as an individual and try to give them the opportunity to showcase themselves for the individual that they are. And it's learning what people's likes are, what their habits are. Again, lifestyle. I often use, big celebrities like a Warren Buffett or a Steve Jobs when he was alive, or Mark Zuckerberg. These guys have a brand, a look. Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank
with his red strap watches.
Yeah, exactly, and a black suit and a white shirt.
Yeah.
I remember watching American Gigolo years ago, and he went into his closet and he had all the white shirts lined up and the black suits lined up, and that's their brand. So it's understanding what that is. And there's a level of confidence that you exude when you feel good in the way that you're presenting yourself. And clothing is a big part of that.
Oh, absolutely. I stress that to everyone that I speak with. People ask me all the time, why do you wear these different outfits? Or how did you come up with this? Well, you're one of the best dressed lawyers I see, or this or that and the other thing. And I say, well, it makes me feel comfortable, number one. I feel confident in what I'm wearing, and I'm proud to wear certain things. It doesn't hurt the fact that it fits me in a way that complements my body and all my hard work from working out and exercising. But the fact that, I've gone to you and you've been able to say, this looks good on you, this looks good on you, or don't wear this, you could wear this, is helpful. And let's face it, first impressions mean a lot, no matter what industry you're in. And dressing a certain part and feeling that, you could be selling anything. But at the end of the day, if you're not comfortable with what you're wearing and presenting yourself, you're not going to sell, and people are going to see right through that.
Right. And so a good example recently, a good client, very high end socially, needed a red bow tie. And I think you did the same thing recently with a red bow tie. And this was what allowed me to show you what I showed you. This guy and I knew what he was going to, which was a very high end event. And I don't like things to look cheap. And sometimes, and you and I had the conversation too, I had forgotten that we did the same thing. But I found a tie that was predominantly red, but it had a little bit of some black flecks in it. And it was much more rich and sophisticated, which totally fit the event and what the need was for, but it looked great. And there's a difference in the way that you present yourself that can be cheap looking or doesn't have the same sophistication that you deserve or that you should be showing off. And I try to examine and dissect those differences and make it right for the individual.
So it's like that refinement within an individual.
Exactly.
So somebody maybe who's 20 years old, 25 years old, 30 years old going to an event versus somebody who's established in a particular career, whether they're speaking to a board of directors or whatever they're doing, a charity event, fine-tuning the specifics. Like a suit is not just a suit. There's so many different variables to it.
Right. So I had someone years ago came to me and they said, look, I'm dealing with these European and Swiss businessmen, and these guys kill it. They know clothing, and I really need to present myself. I need to have, your $10,000 suits and I said, you know what? You don't necessarily need that. I understand what you're saying. I can take my $5,000 suits and half the price of and that's not my average, by the way, that's more on the high end. But this guy looked fabulous. He got, I guess it was like a half a dozen suits at that level, but it was half the price of what he was thinking in his head. And he looked fabulous. You know, he just looked great because he presented himself properly, and it was cut beautifully for him.
Well, that's the misnomer too, that people don't realize. They think that barrier to entry is cost, and they don't realize, and they could be intimidated.
Brand aware and brand conscious. And so that's the case. I mean, look at the lines in the mall outside of Louis or Gucci or whatever. And I'm not sure who those people are that are going in there, or what they're buying, whether it's a novelty thing or whether they're spending, $50,000. I don't know. I'm always in awe of that.
It's definitely changed. Where somebody would spend, I don't know how much it costs, $500-$600 for sandals that say Gucci on them, but they're wearing, basketball shorts and a t-shirt, and don't realize that they could go get a suit for, a couple $100 more, have a custom made suit for them.
Oh, right.
So it is.
Well, it's priorities.
Yeah.
My son, he's 18, he just graduated from high school. I said, I want to buy you a graduation gift, but I want you to have a say in what you're looking for. And he wanted these sneakers. And so I went online and looked at the sneakers, and they're between like $300 and $500 for and I'm sure there are more that are more expensive. But I recently saw the Jordan movie Air. And just the evolution of where they started and what they've come to. And it's interesting, but that's what drives a lot of the public, is the way that these things are advertised and who's wearing them. That's an important thing. So we go back to my athletes, and now I dress these guys, and they want to know, like, who's dressing you, or what are you wearing, or what's this? And so again, that's what leads into more business for us.
So we talked a lot about your successes, and this show is also designed to talk about some potential failures or mistakes that you may have made as you journeyed through to where you are. Is there any things in particular that you want to share with the audience that you learned from something that may have occurred throughout the years that you learned from and you wouldn't do again, or some experience?
Yeah. So like I said before, I'm not perfect, and I shared a story of a recent thing, which wasn't really my mistake, but I think my biggest errors in my career have been from being stubborn. You believe in yourself so much, and you believe that something's going to happen. It's like playing the lottery, The chances of winning the lottery are extremely slim, but there are still people that will go out there and spend, their paycheck on a lottery ticket, and the percentages are just not very high. And so, being stubborn, there was a point in my career before I moved to Tampa where I was out of work for 11 months. I had come out of a huge 6-figure job and thought I was no problem going into the next job, and it was not easy. Something that I haven't mentioned yet in this interview is my other love is cooking. Food has always been a big love of mine, and the creativity and the presentation. I love to bake. I bake wedding cakes.
Oh.
I haven't done it so much recently, but I used to do that. And baking is a very specific art. There's some give and take, but for the most part, you've really got to follow a created recipe to have something that's really successful. So I ended up working in a catering business and end up graduating to a level of managing a catering company, and loved it. It wasn't exactly what, wasn't providing me the same income as I was making in clothing, but I found it was something else that I could do, that I could enjoy, and I still to this day enjoy that. So I found some solace in, another arena, but it was still a difficult time not working in clothing.
So that transition, you went to the baking side of things when you had some issues with,
I started that again in high school, actually middle school, when boys used to have to take home ec. So we had sewing and cooking class, and the girls would have to take metal shop and wood shop. So I learned that back in early days, preteen days, and found that I can be creative, similar to, designing clothing in the food arena and that field. And so, yeah, but that gave me a little backup, basically. Then there was another point when I was here in Tampa after I left Hugo Boss. I worked for a small retailer and had visions of grandeur to create a big clothing store, and worked with the fella that owned the store. And we tried and we weren't successful. It kind of shortened the story, but it was something that I put 4 years into, and it made my first marriage fell apart, and it was a challenge with my children, and that was tough. I was younger then. I didn't know what the consequences were going to be, but I believed in something. But I was, and maybe it wasn't so much that I was stubborn at the time, but I really believed in the fact that it was going to happen. And then it didn't. But it was right after that I segued into Bespoke & Company. So I took that 4-year dream and I made it more realistic for myself, and created this thing that has now grown into what it is today.
You covered a very interesting topic, and it's a theme on the show. You don't quit.
Mm-hmm.
You went through the hardship. You did what you had to do. You dealt with life's fastballs at
Mm-hmm.
you, and you had to essentially get through it. And you hit a bottom, wherever that may be, but you didn't let it stop you from moving forward. So many people think in our careers and in professions that we just woke up one day and we were this successful entity. People don't see, I always use this adage, I don't eat hot dogs, but nobody wants to see how the hot dog is being made. They just want to eat it. And it's the same thing. Nobody wants to necessarily see what it took to get or do, especially in an immediate gratification world in which we live in now with this generation. They don't want to work to get to the point of that potential success or where they want to be. I went through very similar challenges in my career, where I was chasing .com.
Mm-hmm.
I started a .com in the early 2000s. Terrible time in the real estate space I was in, and I lost a tremendous amount of money and had a terrible experience with it. And I learned from it. You learn from these things, but it didn't stop me from trying to pursue something that I loved. And what I think it creates is humility, in part because you recognize that you could always go back.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's gratitude associated with where you are, and you essentially covet what you've created, and you're very protective.
Right.
And that goes to your business model with regard to your client base, with regard to how you present, how you deal with your marketing, how you've limited, you're not as stubborn, so to speak, you've learned.
And I think that's that entrepreneurial spirit that can sometimes go off in the wrong direction. And there is that stubbornness. And I remember growing up, that was something that I wanted to be right all the time, And my dad and I had some friction as a result of that. But you used the word humility, I believe, before. And, my dad tried to instill some humility and teach me how to be humble. And that was challenging for me. I didn't understand it. I didn't know how to do that, but I've learned, and now I kind of now I'm an expert in humility.
I think age, timing, and experiences have a way of helping us learn.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I've tried to teach that to my kids, and I want to take a step back real quick and just say that when I was down and was separated at the time, going through a divorce, I said, I'm not doing this again. I became somewhat of a hermit. It was a real challenge to my relationship with my children, who were my world at the time. And I really continued to try to do what I was doing and grow for them. My oldest, Mason, probably doesn't know this to the level that I really feel it in my heart. And we've always had not a distant relationship, but not as much as an interactive relationship as I do with my other two, and then my now stepdaughters. But I met Nicole, And we had a mutual group of friends for about a year. And then I decided that I did want to, I'm a glutton for punishment and I wanted to go through it again. But she was everything that built my success back again. She was inspiring and she was uplifting and all of those things that a relationship should be to be successful. And, just coming out of a failed relationship and 24 years with the same person and, dealing with what I dealt with and the anger and the, trauma and Nicole believed in me and, she went through something similar with her ex and it was eye-opening and it really gave me the confidence back. I mentioned my business partner. There was a point in time where he was, not that he gave up on me, but we were just not on the same level. And it was a challenge for him and still continuing to believe in me. But Nicole reinstilled that and brought that. And now Brett and I are closest brothers. And it continues to fuel the success of our business because we are so aligned with one another.
It is great. That is such a great point because our lives are very parallel in that respect. Mm-hmm. I went through a terrible divorce. I was depressed. I was overweight. I think I was in a fog for a 10-year period of time. It was terrible before meeting my wife. But my father told me that if you have the right woman beside you, supporting you, the sky's the limit. Mm-hmm. You will blossom and grow and the world will be yours for the taking.
Right.
And he had, God rest his soul, he said, make sure she's your best friend. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what that meant until I was in my 40s and until I met my wife. I had no idea that your spouse, that your partner was supposed to be your best friend, or at least in my world, it works for me. And it sounds like it's same for you. And with that, and that respect and that mutual love and appreciation, even doing this podcast, mm-hmm. I became so empowered to be able to do things because I knew I had a supportive woman who keeps me in check as well and compliments me. Sounds to me like you have the same
and
type
you said
of
mutual love. It's mutual, genuine love. I mean, there's love and there's lust and there's, we're nature's beings. And so we have needs but that genuine camaraderie that is just, it's that animal magnetism, but it is an intellectual magnetism. You don't know what that is.
Yeah.
There's millions and millions of people out there and we're one individual. And to align with someone else that is either like-minded or that complements us it's a challenge, and
a blessing.
And a blessing. When you have it, it's a blessing. And the last couple of events that I have, our event has gotten so big that I try to do my thank yous to my sponsors and the people that put together the event. Nicole has reminded me the last two events I forgot to thank her. And so now I have my opportunity. Hopefully she'll listen to this podcast and hear that I mean, you can't take it for granted. And sometimes we do. But the thanks that we have for our spouses or our significant others or our best friends, you can't put a price on that. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that if you're in a relationship in which you have a partner that's not supportive of what you want to do, obviously, you're not.
Well, that was true for those 4 years that I was thinking that I was going to turn this into something, and I completely lost that. So I was swimming against the tide, and it was a fight for survival for myself.
Sure.
Then I was doing it for me and not for a partnership.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all. But what it just brings to mind the fact that some people are battling not only the idea of developing their career or developing their passion of their particular expertise, what they want to do. They're battling their spouse. They're they're battling their partner, and they don't realize it, that they have somebody that is detrimental to their growth. And it's shameful. It is what it is. I'm glad I went through what I went through personally, because I have such a greater appreciation of how bad things could be. And I don't use it as a that's my barometer, but
you can respect the experience that you had.
Absolutely.
And know what you have better now as a result of that.
Absolutely. And ensure that I take care of that.
So let me tell you, and I'm sorry to have to relate this back to business, but
No,
one of the areas of my business that is huge for us is weddings. We do a tremendous amount of weddings. We dress, brides, grooms, groomsmen, full wedding parties, mothers of the bride.
And I want to put in, I don't mean to interrupt, but I also want to put in a little plug for you. You're also doing some of my wife's clothing.
Yes.
You don't only do men, you do women too.
Right. Our women's business is a smaller percentage, but has really grown, and has been wonderful.
So I'm going to go.
Those weddings. Well, there was a wedding that we were doing recently. It wasn't even my client. It was one of the gals that works for me, or with me, I should say. And the groom came in and he had a suit made, and it was all good. He came in with his dad, who was buying the suit, and a month or so later, they were in, and the gal that I work with came and she said, "I need your help with something," and he never shared the finished product until after, or I shouldn't say the product until it was finished after the fact with his fiance, and she hated it. And
wow.
And I dealt with this once before with a client of mine, but they were really, it got to a point where I'm not going to say it caused a fight, but it definitely caused some tension. And so I said, you guys are getting married. You're going to have to deal with things in life that are going to be bigger than the color of a suit. And I will do whatever we need to do to make it right for you. And we sorted through it and we were able to do it. But I tried to give them a perspective, a fatherly perspective on, part of this journey that they're about to embark on. And it's tough. And not all personalities were, and I didn't know this couple at all. I didn't know their personalities, tendencies, whatever, but I saw the situation and helped them, guide them through the situation. And it was interesting.
Oh, I bet it was.
I know, and using what I went through and what I learned, in my personal experience, I try to share that and hopefully other people won't make the same mistakes. And, it's funny, not only am I fatherly, but sometimes I feel like a therapist with the clients that I have. And I know in your situation, you do too, because people are coming to you with, it's usually a problem.
Generally, I meet my clients through a problem, and I become a little bit of a therapist as well, which, you have to be understanding and empathetic. And I think we take for granted sometimes that, at least from my perspective, what I've been doing it 30 plus years, that it, it's like putting on a pair of pants. I dealing with litigation or whatever it may be, but for people, that's not the case. It could be distasteful. It's the first time they're dealing with it. It's the unknown. It's just like me and having to deal with something that I never dealt with before. When I started the podcast, the unknown associated with going through these things. Well, you can't
take anything for granted. You know what you know. I know what I know. But my clients that come in for the first time don't have the expertise that I have. So I have to be cognizant of that. I have to be able to understand that this might be intimidating. They may not have any clue in the world. So you have to take it step by step. And it can't be overwhelming. It has to be a great experience or it's not going to repeat. And we talked about that before, about having that repeat business. And I know for you, it's basically more from, in the future, it's going to be a referral from that individual that has a good experience and a good outcome from coming to you. When they see someone that had a similar issue, they're going to recommend that. And
I think too that there's also, you have to allow yourself to be a little vulnerable when you step into your shop, because you're essentially, you can't have the guards up and have this preset idea as to what you want to wear, how you want to look. I mean, there may be some people that come in that way, but I think you need to allow yourself a little bit more freedom of expression, or allow you to do your job,
right?
And kind of like defrost the individual so that you can really get to the core of them and to see what, would be best for them. Because sometimes you don't even realize what you think may look good or
Right.
or
No,
what.
that's true. That's true. And I try to take baby steps myself with those clients, because some people have preconceived notions about what they want, but I don't want to go in, and I will not make decisions for people unless I really know them really well and I know what they're going to like. But I had this either yesterday or the day before, that a fellow was indecisive about what he wanted, and he was between a couple things. I said, I'm not making this decision for you. You need to pick what you like and go with your gut, and it's going to look fabulous. No matter which one you pick, I'm going to make sure it looks great on you. And I wouldn't let someone pick something that's not going to look good. Like we talked about the red bow tie. If it's going to look cheap or it's not going to represent that individual, then I'm going to share an alternative, but I'll make sure I kind of sway them away. But I had a client from the Orlando Magic, and he came in one morning and he said, I dreaded this ride over here. This ride. I'm like, why? What's the problem? He said, all I need is just a plain blue suit and a plain black suit, just solid, no frills. And I'm like, that's fine. You can have that. And he's like, I know how you like to, make things stand out but there's a need for certain things, and I want to satisfy that need in people. And you can't overdo it. You do have to sometimes have kid gloves and listen and understand the situation before you jump in with your ideas and expertise. And listening is something that my dad impressed upon me. I wasn't very good at it when I was younger. Again, thinking that I knew it all, but I've learned to take a breath and listen, and that's part of the therapeutic, aspect of the business of what you do and what I do.
Oh yeah, for sure. As we finish up, I do kind of want to put you on the spot for some of our people who are listening or watching us. So for the folks out there who are entering into the world of fashion, mm-hmm. or need a suit for a guy mm-hmm. that may need some suits, what would you suggest if it's their first foray in getting colors, mm-hmm. or deciding what they would need that would be flexible enough for them to get away with? What type of setups
it's funny.
would you suggest?
I mean, I'm going to use the fella that referred you to me, and Jack Gordon, and he is the perfect example of my a professional client that comes to me with this need. I offer clothing packages. They're on my website, bespokeandcofl.com. The other thing is my Instagram has been a great vehicle for us with imagery and such.
We'll be able to get it up here.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Jeremiah, we'll get it posted up here.
_and_co. But if you go on that, but again, going back with these packages, it's a great introduction to what we do. It makes it easy because sometimes people don't know what they need. So I offer these different packages so that you can get kickstarted. But then I have professionals like Jack that will come in, and that's the annual refresh. You're freshening up your wardrobe. You know exactly this is it. These are the parameters, and it's worked for me. And so they just continue to do so. And I have different levels of qualities within those packages. But for me, it's having a conversation, sometimes before the appointment itself, to assess the needs. Sometimes I'll challenge the client, especially with weddings, to have photos ready so that you can show me, what your thoughts are, what the colors are around the wedding or the event, so that I can assess the needs, much more in depth and be able to present the right things. Having a knowledge of what the client needs ahead of an appointment, which I do work exclusively by appointment, will allow me to pull the things ahead of time. So an example is your wife was looking for an animal print coat. And so I have procured fabrics to show her the next time we meet so that she can look at these different fabrics and choose something that fits her needs. So that's basically it. It's really, for me, understanding the client and what that actual need is going to be, and what the economics around the situation are. I have to have a sense of what the budget is, what people want to pay. There are preconceived notions that custom clothing is unaffordable for some. It's not true.
So what would be an entry level price
Entry
point
level
approximately
suit
for a
is
suit for someone?
$9.95.
So they can get a suit, and that suit could be used for weddings, funerals,
yes,
events, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's
the all-purpose
and
need.
you could go into Macy's or Nordstrom or any of those places off the rack. They're $1,000, $1,500, sometimes more.
Yeah, exactly.
And they won't fit you like a custom suit.
Exactly.
That's
so, and it's also the lifestyle need. So, clothing has changed. We've gotten more casual. We've gotten more sporty. Performance fabrics are a big deal. We make clothing in performance fabrics, similar to what you'd find at Lululemon, the stretchy fabrics or dry fit fabrics. Well, I use those to make suits. So my athletes love it because it's like their
daily wear. It's like the old school,
it's what they're wearing in their
old school jogging.
Yeah,
suits.
jogging, exactly. And we make suits out of those fabrics.
Well, I know you made my jeans, so every time I wear my jeans, I get compliments from people that where'd you get those jeans?
Yeah.
So I think that's it. So that you fast forwarded to one of the last questions I wanted to ask you, and that's trends as far as where you see where is the industry now. I mean, we're out of COVID,
right?
But we're in somewhat more of a more relaxed setting, not as formal, a lot more tech type people doing things, social media, things like that. I mean, when I go to court, obviously I have to wear a suit and be respectful of the whole process and the judicial system. But where do you see the trends going with clothing?
So, kind of what I was just talking about, being more casual, being more sporty. I think COVID changed us. Clothing in the workplace was a very competitive thing. Who's wearing this and who's wearing that, and what is she going to wear those heels today? That type of thing. And then it became virtual. People were in their, in a jacket, maybe a tie from the waist up, and then who knew what was happening otherwise. Sure. So we've kind of been able to create a hybrid, like I was talking about with these performance fabrics. We have this one fabric, and I'll say, try a pair of pants. From some of my professionals, men or women that travel, sitting on an airplane with like jeans that stretch, or these now performance fabrics that stretch, it's a game changer. And so we're able to take those fabrics and translate them into whatever the needs are in the clothing.
Oh, wow.
And so, we talked about jewel tones before, rich burgundies and plum colors, dark greens. And we take these jewel tones and mix a little black in with them, and it gives them a dark richness that's very sophisticated. And those have been kind of the trends.
So people shouldn't be afraid of those colors.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, it's not for everybody. We still, blues and grays are still the mainstay of our staple clothing. It's what you're comfortable with. We basically have an outline of what we wear by how we grew up. I grew up with the navy blazer and the khaki pants, or the tan poplin suit in the summer. We talk about colors of shoes. Some guys will ask me, do I wear black shoes or do I wear brown shoes? And, I had brown loafers growing up, so I wear brown. If you had black shoes growing up, that's kind of where we started, and then we evolve from there. So I try to have an understanding of where people came from so that I can address these needs comfortably and kind of softly, so it's not a huge transformation. You need to be comfortable with your second skin, and I dress in a 3-piece suit. I love wearing suits, and people ask me, how can you wear it? It's like, this is my second skin. This is what I'm comfortable doing. I'm not a heavy perspirer, so that this suit happens to be 100% cashmere. And it's 90 degrees outside today, but it's a lightweight worsted cashmere, and it works. I mean, we're in a climate controlled environment inside. If I was outside for a couple hours, I'd be hot.
Yeah.
But
so as we close, what's going on for Bespoke? What's the next thing? Are you doing anything? Any plans?
So we do have plans. I won't divulge everything. We're just in a growth mode. My biggest challenge, and you talked about this a little bit before, is getting people to work, especially young people. Oh, yeah. And I have been looking similar to what my competitors do, but in a little more sophisticated fashion, looking for people that can help me grow my brand, that have an entrepreneurial spirit, that believe in themselves, that want to present themselves in a certain way. And that's how we're going to do. I mean, I'm not going to be doing this for forever, although I will be doing it in a small way, I'm sure, forever, because I love dressing.
Yeah.
But it's really just, again, growing the physical plant of my business and growing our team.
Any events coming up?
So it's actually a quiet event time, which is nice. So it's we'll get back to
summer
events in the fall.
Tends to be that way.
Yeah. So my big event will be, again, it's an annual event. It'll be on Groundhog's Day, February 2nd. It's a Friday night. Again, we do a great fashion show. It's a really nice opportunity to showcase what we do well, and for people to see people that they're familiar with dressed in the clothing, and we have live music. And
is that Armature?
That's at Armature Works.
Armature Works. Thank you. Yeah. Well, that's great, and I hope everybody gets to check out you at Bespoke. David's a great guy. I really want to thank you for sharing your story with me. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got to talk about it, and I think for the audience and the listeners, Bespoke and Company off of Beta Bay.
Yeah, Beta Bay in South Tampa.
Beta Bay in South Tampa. Go to David. He's a great guy, and we thank you for listening and thank you for watching. And remember, keep it pro to pro. That's all for today's episode of Pro to Pro. I hope you enjoyed hearing from our guest and gained some valuable insights into the world of entrepreneurship. Like and subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes, and don't forget to follow us on social media. Thanks for watching and listening, and remember to keep it pro to pro.